Happy Monday, Manna Online. My name's Nick, and if you're like me and you have kids, you've probably experienced the litany of questions that often start like, "Hey Mom, what does this mean?" Or, "Hey Dad, why do we do that?" The questions can be never ending. Well, every once in a while, kids will stumble upon a profound question that's way deeper than they really realize, like, "Hey Dad, what's communion, and why do we do it?" Heard this from my son recently, and it got me thinking, I wonder how many believers truly understand the significance of communion, or is it something we just haven't thought much about? So this week, that's what we're going to talk about. Now, I have to admit, this is a huge topic, and we can go much deeper with the history and the theology. I could take you to Bible college, but we don't have time for that. So this week, here's my goal. I just want to press a little bit deeper, and I really want to spur our hunger and desire to study and understand more. So let's talk about this topic. Let's talk about communion. You know, some people call it the Eucharist. It comes from the Greek word Eucharistia, meaning to give thanks or thanksgiving. Other people call it the Lord's Supper, which makes sense considering that Jesus, he instituted all of this at the Last Supper with his disciples. That's where he introduced communion, and we'll talk more about that later this week. But today, I want to talk about the word communion. You know, early church leaders, they've been using this word for centuries, but you may be surprised to find out that the word communion, it's actually not in the Bible. Nevertheless, I honestly think that this is probably one of the best words that we could use to summarize our goal and our intention every time we observe this holy tradition. Think about the word commune, the root of communion, to commune. You know, to commune with others, it implies relationship and fellowship and even intimacy. And although we don't see the word commune directly in the Bible, we do see this concept written from Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 10. So I want to read this. You know, Paul is he's in the middle of rebuking the Corinthian church about idolatry and participating in pagan rituals, but he uses this example of communion. And I want you to see how he describes communion right here. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 16 says this: "The cup of blessing," that's communion, that's the Lord's Supper, "the cup of blessing that we bless, is it not a participation in the blood of Christ? And the bread that we break, is it not a participation in the body of Christ?" Why am I emphasizing the word participation so much? It's because the Greek word that Paul is using here is koinonia. What that means is fellowship. And so it implies intimacy, and not just fellowship and intimacy with each other, but specifically in this context with Christ, his blood, his body. What a beautiful picture of us communing with God through the person of Jesus. And this, I believe, is the heart of communion. Yes, we're remembering Christ's work on the cross, and yes, we're giving thanks, but all from a place of communing with God, deepening our relational intimacy with him. You know, communion, it was never meant to just be a ritual that we walk through the motions with cold hearts and check off boxes. Communion's a special way that we get to share koinonia, or that relational intimacy with God. And it makes sense, right? All throughout human history, God's been at work fulfilling his redemptive plan for mankind. It should be no surprise to us that God desires us to be in relationship with him. So when we take communion, we're celebrating that relationship being restored. We get to experience koinonia with Christ because of his sacrifice on the cross for us. What a blessing and a humbling reality that is, which produces thanksgiving in our heart. I love you guys. Bless you. I can't wait to continue this conversation tomorrow.